Delegates, if you could find your seat, we are going to begin momentarily. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I call to order the opening session of the fourth high-level conference of heads of counter-terrorism agencies of member states. Please take your seats. It is my great honor to welcome the Secretary General of the United Nations, ministers, heads of counter-terrorism agencies, senior officials, and distinguished guests joining us today from around the world for this fourth high-level conference. We will begin with a very short video.
Terrorism remains a persistent and increasingly complex threat to international peace and security. Terrorist groups continue to adapt, exploiting fragility, instability, and new technologies to expand their reach, cross borders, and evade detection. No country can confront this threat alone. Terrorism is one of many unprecedented crises facing the world today, and the United Nations must respond to them, all under sustained financial constraints. Through UN 80 and wider reform, we are working to deliver more efficiently with clearer evidence of results. In response, UNOCT is offering more integrated support to member states, closer to where it is needed, aligning policy, system-wide coordination, and program delivery with the global counter-terrorism strategy, grounded in human rights and gender equality. In 2025, a team of 149 colleagues from 60 nationalities, working across headquarters and 12 field presences, engaged over 13,000 practitioners from 170 member states. At the policy level, UNOCT convened counter-terrorism dialogue through briefings, expert meetings, and high-level conferences, bringing policymakers, practitioners, and civil society together. With CTED and the 1267 monitoring team, UNOCT coordinated 2 Secretary General's reports on the threat posed by Daesh. The office also prepared the Secretary General's report for the 9th review of the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy in 2026, drawing on more than 80 submissions from governments, regional organizations, civil society, youth, and victims of terrorism. Beyond policy leadership, UNOCT continued to strengthen coordination across the United Nations system. In 2025, it expanded multi-partner approaches through the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Coordination Compact, regional platforms, and country-level engagement. In West Africa, the Integrated Border Stability Mechanism brought UNOCT, IOM, UNODC, and Interpol together with 8 countries, moving from fragmented assistance to shared analysis, guiding implementation across 600 nationally validated recommendations. At the operational level, through 17 global programs, UNOCT strengthened the national systems member states rely on to prevent and counter terrorism. At airports, the United Nations Go Travel software now screens passengers against watch lists in real time in 7 countries, processing 78 million passenger records and generating 5,500 confirmed alerts. Across Africa, the Fusion Cells program brought police, intelligence, and border agencies together to analyze threats, training 619 professionals to connect previously siloed information. In Central Asia, UNOCT supported 5 states to strengthen cross-border cooperation against evolving terrorist threats. In Iraq, working with UNICEF, IOM, and UNODC, UNOCT helped the government manage the return of more than 21,000 people from the camps established in northeast Syria following the defeat of Daesh, bringing accountability, rehabilitation, and reintegration under one framework. Through the Victims of Terrorism Associations Network, launched in 2025, 120 victims from 40 countries came together as a collective voice in UN counter-terrorism discussions. That momentum carried into the first conference on victims of terrorism in Africa, convened in Rabat, Morocco. Underpinning these efforts was stronger financing coherence. A record 32 partners contributed $65.9 million to the United Nations Trust Fund for Counter-Terrorism, with 62% directed to integrated multi-partner initiatives. As the Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy marks its 20th anniversary in 2026, UNOCT is preparing for the next phase with a new strategic plan, a strengthened results architecture, enhanced transparency through a live funding dashboard, and a delivery model built around integrated support, measurable results, and clear accountability. Together with member states and partners, UNOCT remains committed to delivering together for a world free from terrorism.
Thank you for watching this video, and now I will deliver my introductory remarks from the rostrum. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to welcome all of you to this fourth high-level conference of the heads of counter-terrorism agencies of our member states. At the outset, I would like to express my gratitude to you, Mr. Secretary General, for joining us and for your support to the mandate and work of the United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism. I would also like to thank all of you, the participants in the high-level conference, as well as the 2026 Counter-Terrorism Week at the United Nations. We have received registration from over 1,000 in-person participants, representing 119 member states, 31 regional organizations, and 17 United Nations entities. And in addition to these, 91 institutions from academia, civil society, and the private sector. This year's conference takes place at the time of unusual geopolitical trends. Heightened geopolitical tensions, protracted conflicts, growing fragmentation, and the erosion of multilateralism are reshaping the international landscape. And the terrorist threat continues to evolve, becoming more complex and multipolar. Terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda, Daesh, and their affiliates remain adaptive and resilient. They are becoming more sophisticated, including due to use of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity threats. They leverage instability, governance gaps, socioeconomic inequalities, and new and emerging technologies to expand their reach, recruit, and mobilize resources. Lutter efficacement contre le terrorisme.
Effectively combating terrorism requires strict respect for international right, national law, rule of law, and human rights. This requires pursuing progress when it comes to women's rights and gender equality, as well as participation in a meaningful way and the protection of civil society. The implementation of prevention approaches, together with the assistance of all of society and public authorities, is a key prerequisite for effectiveness and sustainability. Understanding the scale of the terrorist threat, we are looking forward to the 9th review of the Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy of the UN. As noted by Secretary General of the UN, the holding of the review this year coincides with the 20th anniversary of the adoption strategy. This significant event provides member states with an important opportunity to reaffirm their common commitment to fighting terrorism in all of its forms and manifestations.
La responsabilidad
Excellencies, the primary responsibility for preventing and combating terrorism falls on member states. At the same time, there is ample experience and valuable specialized knowledge beyond simply governments. The agenda of the Counter-Terrorism Week, which includes this high-level conference and the side events, reveals the importance of involving a broad diversity of actors in counterterrorism, including the United Nations system, regional organizations, civil society, the victims of terrorism, women, young people, and academia.
UNOCT, including through the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Coordination Compact, remains committed to performing its functions effectively and efficiently. Under the leadership of the Secretary General, UNOCT will also strive to strengthen coordination, coherence, and the collective impact of the United Nations in support of member states' efforts to counter terrorism. You can count on UNOCT's continued partnership as we strive towards a safe and more peaceful future, one that is free from terrorism. Thank you. I would like now give the floor to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres. The floor is yours, sir.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, each of you gathered here today bears an exceptional duty to help lead the global response to terrorism, and thank you for your commitment and welcome to the United Nations. We meet at a moment of acute instability. Conflicts are triggering energy shocks, inflation, and anger across the globe. Temperatures are rising, millions are displaced, and millions more face economic hardship. These conditions of want, of fragility, of mistrust are ideal circumstances for terror to thrive. From Africa to South Asia and across the Middle East, affiliates of Al-Qaeda and Daesh and other terrorist groups persist. Violent extremist narratives, including those based on xenophobia, racism, and other forms of intolerance, or in the name of religion or belief, pose deadly domestic threats in many nations. Terrorists of all stripes are adapting. New technologies make it easier for them to finance and recruit. Criminal networks speed the flow of cash and weapons, now including deadly drones. Armed conflicts contribute to the erosion of rule of law, leading to entrenched patterns of impunity across many affected regions. We know the brutal consequences all too well. Lives cut short, livelihoods destroyed, and communities divided for generations. Women and girls are disproportionately affected, as terrorist actors use sexual and gender-based violence to control populations, to erode community bonds, to facilitate recruitment and generate revenue. That is why victims and survivors must remain at the heart of all we do. Excellencies, this year marks the 20th anniversary of the UN Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy, our shared framework for action and results. This milestone is an opportunity to assess progress and strengthen our resolve. I would like to thank the co-facilitators, the permanent representatives of Finland and Morocco, for steering the 9th strategy review. Looking ahead, I see 4 priorities. First, prevention. We must address the conditions and grievances that allow terrorism to take root. Too many people face poverty, discrimination, disenfranchisement, and violation of their rights. These wrongs do not justify terrorism. Nothing can. But they can create vulnerabilities that terrorist groups are quick to exploit. This is why advancing sustainable development and upholding human rights are vital to counter terrorism. In practice, this means expanding economic opportunity, ensuring greater inclusion for minorities, enabling the meaningful participation of women and youth, supporting local peace-building efforts, and protecting civic space. A more equal world is a safer world. That is the power of prevention. Second, cooperation. Terrorism is a transnational threat, and no nation can address it alone. The Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy has been our foundation for 2 decades, and the UN Office of Counter-Terrorism, spearheading the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Coordination Compact, supports member states in their commitments. By deepening collaboration between states, we can close critical gaps, enhance capacity building, and leverage one another's expertise. But we can go further by working with partners who know their communities and their needs. Young people are creating prevention efforts that resonate with their peers. Civil society organizations being trusted community connections and local knowledge that strengthen our effectiveness and legitimacy. Victims share powerful testimonies that challenge terrorist narratives. And the private sector plays a crucial role in sharing insight and securing the technologies terrorists seek to exploit. Our allies are found across society, and by working together, we enhance our reach and our legitimacy. Third, technology. Terrorists have grown adept at exploiting emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, digital platforms, and unmanned weapons. These tools have supercharged their ability to recruit, finance, and plan attacks. But technology also offers powerful tools to detect threats early, stop the flow of illicit assets, and understand pathways to terrorist radicalization. With the Pact for the Future and the Global Digital Compact, member states made a commitment to harness digital tools for the public good. And the Independent International Scientific Panel on AI will provide us with even greater insights to guide our work. Excellence. Quatrièmement,
Excellencies, fourth and most crucially, our values. Experience shows that heavy-handed or inappropriate counterterrorism measures risk fanning the flames of division and cause people to lose faith in the institutions supposed to protect them. In the worst-case scenario, measures purported to counter terrorism can in fact feed the conditions conducive to radicalization toward violence. That is why our response must be rooted in the very principles that terror seeks to destroy: justice, human dignity, and solidarity. All of our efforts must be firmly grounded in the rule of law and human rights, as well as informed by meaningful engagement with the people and communities whose lives have been affected by terrorism. Holding ourselves to the highest standard is how we heal wounds and rebuild trust where it has been broken.
Excellence, le terrorisme
Excellencies, terrorism is evolving, and so must we. Though the task before us is complex, our direction is clear. Through prevention, cooperation, and our unwavering commitment to human rights, we can build a safer world in which people everywhere live free from fear. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank the Secretary General for his remarks and for his strong support and vision that led to the establishment of the United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism. It is thanks to you, Secretary General, that we are convening today for the first time the heads of counterintelligence, counter-terrorism, and other security agencies of member states around the world to advance multilateral counter-terrorism cooperation. We are grateful for your leadership in having made counterterrorism a priority for the United Nations and for your continued guidance in ensuring the United Nations serve member states more effectively and efficiently in this regard, always grounded in the Charter of the United Nations, human rights, and gender equality. Now we will turn to our special guests for their interventions. And first, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Fatima Ali Haider, a medical doctor representing the Victims of Terrorism Associations Network, also known as VOTAN. Dr. Haider, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Your Excellency, the Secretary General, and respected colleagues, I am honored to be here today, both as a victim of terrorism and also as a victims' rights advocate, an academic, and a member of the Victims of Terrorism Associations Network, VOTAN, a diverse collaboration of over 120 members from over 40 countries. I'm also honored to have this opportunity to thank Your Excellency as you complete your tenure. Your tireless efforts towards peace during unprecedented volatile times are commendable. To begin, I highlight some successes for victims of terrorism in the past decade. We have taken up important roles as academics, researchers, peace practitioners, and recognized experts. This year, VOTAN was consulted for the 9th review of the Global Counterterrorism Strategy, another important milestone and a global first. I would encourage member states, especially the counterterrorism institutions, to follow this precedent and ensure victims are collaborators on policies and strategies. We have a lot to offer. Despite many accomplishments, concerns remain. The evolving and wide-ranging needs of victims surpass a narrow focus on counterterrorism and security alone. To build their lives, victims need gender-sensitive and trauma-informed strategies for a range of issues, such as economic security, psychosocial well-being, legal rights, remembrance, and protection from online and offline violence. Respecting victims' human rights and supporting their needs is already written into the Global Counterterrorism Strategy, but the slow and uneven implementation compromises human security and hinders victim healing. Coming to solutions. As a woman and a victim myself, I attest to the fact, supported by research, that women are impacted differently by terrorism than men. My doctoral research underscores that ongoing terrorism can lead to serious forms of gender-based violence. Despite this, women's voices are conspicuously absent in all spheres of strategic decision-making. We need to redesign the security architecture to ensure women's leadership and equal presence at all levels, from the home to public spaces, national security bodies, and yes, right up to the Security Council. Secondly, ensuring equal participation from developing countries where victims are affected by overlapping crises, including war, conflict, and terrorism, is essential. In these contexts, victims' needs are complex and inadequately addressed, requiring urgent and strategic support. Lastly, engaging young people as our partners is a must. The future belongs to them. My decade of work with young people in victim support shows that they are the most important channel to foster compassion, counter hate, and prevent extremism in society. Simultaneously, we must better protect and support young people, especially children affected by terrorism, many of whom grow up with invisible trauma, interrupted education, and responsibilities far beyond their years. I hope to see the day when women, victims, and young people are equally represented in all security spheres. In the meantime, I leave you with my mentor's teaching that hope is not an emotion, but an action that we take every day to create a safer future free of terrorism. Thank you.
I thank Dr. Ali Haider for her powerful testimony. Hearing directly from those who dedicate their efforts to supporting victims of terrorism is a profound reminder of the human cost of terror and of the resilience and dignity of those who survive it and those who serve them. The United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism remains fully committed to placing the needs and voices of victims at the center of our counter-terrorism efforts. Now I would like to invite Mr. John Huvani to take the floor. Mr. Huvani was a first responder in New York City with the police department when the 9/11 terrorist attacks occurred 25 years ago against the Twin Towers in New York. Sir, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Secretary General, and all distinguished guests that are here. This is so important as a first responder. Unfortunately, I was working the morning of September 11, 25 years ago. I was assigned to Mayor Giuliani in the security detail. Well, we woke up that morning, like many around the world, and you become a victim of terrorism. You watch civilians, first responders, ordinary people just going to work and not going home that evening. With that being said, the weeks, the months, and the years, everybody's life changed in New York City, which occurs all around the world. What you're doing here is so important for first responders. You're communicating with each other, best practices, and how to defeat that evil. With that being said, it's very important for first responders to train. Each nation should have their first responders trained, tabletop exercises, working together, designing plans to respond to these events. Not only was I in New York City on 9/11, but I was also in London during the 7/7/05 bombings. I was also in Nigeria for a bombing. And India, I got out before they attacked the Taj. So I've had quite an extensive list of seeing terrorism around the country and around the world. It is important never to forget those victims. As the doctor said, we have to remember the people that have passed or injured and maimed for life, and how do we improve ourselves? It's constant training, investment in technology, and making sure that each first responder knows what they're supposed to do in the event of a terrorist attack. Unfortunately, the countries that are very good at it have been the victim so many times. And I really applaud all of you for getting together and discussing these best practices, and to have the Secretary General to devote his time and effort to this is just wonderful. I prepare police departments around the world, currently work in the Dominican Republic, and preparing police officers to respond to emergencies, natural or terrorist attacks. And I'm fortunate enough to have traveled the world and see it affects everyone. International cooperation is important, and communication is key. Communicating with each other. And well, that's the only way we can save lives. And I thank you for your time and appreciate you. Thank you.
I would like to thank Mr. Huane for his very moving remarks. And now I would like to invite Ms. Shamsia Ibrahim Barde, an alumni of UNOCT Youth Engagement and Empowerment Program, to take the floor. Ms. Barde hails from Yobe State, Nigeria, where she works to empower survivors of gender-based violence and strengthen community resilience in areas affected by terrorism. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and fellow young leaders. My name is Shamsia Ibrahim Barde, and I'm honored to join you today as a youth representative from Nigeria and a beneficiary of the Youth Empowerment and Engagement Program, supported by the United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism. I come from northeastern Nigeria, a region that has experienced years of conflict, displacement, and the devastating impacts of violent extremism. Like many young people from my region, I grew up witnessing the consequences of insecurity and the challenges it brings to families and communities. Yet I also witnessed something else: ordinary young people choosing education over violence, dialogue over division, and service over despair. In discussions about terrorism and prevention, we often ask why some young people become vulnerable to extremist narratives. While that is an important question, I believe there is another question we should ask more often. Why do some choose hope over hatred, engagement over isolation, and peace over violence? I and others across Nigeria, Somalia, and around the world are examples of this reality. We were not defined by the challenges around us. Instead, we were strengthened by opportunities to participate, contribute, and lead. Rather than focusing only on the drivers of radicalization and violent extremism, we should also invest in the factors that build resilience. What helps young people reject violence? What enables them to become peace builders? And how can government, communities, and international partners do more to support those positive choices? Through YIP and the strategic communications training provided by UNOCT, I gained practical skills and strength that strengthen my ability to engage communities, counter harmful narratives, and to contribute to local peace-building efforts. More importantly, the program reinforced a simple but powerful lesson. When young people are trusted, supported, and given meaningful opportunities, they become agents of prevention and positive change. The lesson is clear. Peace building is not only about preventing young people from taking the wrong path, it's equally about empowering them to continue on the right path. This requires meaningful inclusion. Young people should not be engaged only during consultations or invited into discussions after decisions have already been made. We should be involved in designing, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating the policies and programs that affect our lives. Inclusion should not be symbolic. It should be genuine, sustained, and impactful. As we discuss the further and future of counterterrorism, peace building, and international cooperation, I encourage member states and partners to recognize and invest in the peace-building potential that already exists within millions of young people around the world. Let us invest more in governance. Let us invest in rule of law, youth leadership development, trust-based civic participation, and opportunities for young people to lead. These are among the most effective prevention strategies available to us. Young people are not merely beneficiaries of peace and security efforts. We are partners. We are innovators. We are community mobilizers. We are peace builders. Thank you.
I would like to thank Ms. Barda for her very inspiring remarks, and I would like now invite Ms. Rima Junusova to take the floor. Ms. Junusova is a national of the Republic of Kazakhstan who was repatriated in May 2019 from the famous Al-Hol camp in the Syrian Arab Republic. Ms. Junusova, the floor is yours.
Ваше превосходительство.
Excellencies, distinguished Secretary General Guterres, delegates of international organizations, national delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to address this gathering. My name is Rumgul Jamusova. I'm from Kazakhstan, the mother of 4 children. Today I represent not only myself, but also thousands of men, women, and children from different countries whose voices are rarely heard in this hall. I speak on behalf of those who successfully evacuated from camps in Syria and Iraq, as well as those who remain there to this day waiting for assistance and the opportunity to return home. In July 2013, after an unprecedented wave of radical media propaganda, my husband and I traveled to Syria. Many of those who arrived in Syria were young people who sincerely believed that they were doing the right thing. Yet many did not understand how they were being manipulated through a carefully crafted narrative that disguised the true nature of armed extremist groups. Today, I openly acknowledge that this was a mistake, and I consider it my duty to speak honestly about it. I am not here to justify my past actions. I'm here to remind us all that even a person who has taken a dangerous path is capable of change. Governments, societies, and international organizations that provide people with a second chance through rescue, education, healthcare, and peaceful reintegration are making the world safer for everyone. Human life had little value for leaders of radical groups in Syria and Iraq. Their promises turned out to be false, and their actions brought only chaos, destruction, and death. Over time, conditions became increasingly severe due to continuous bombardment and shelling. Families were forced to move into trenches and makeshift shelters. Food and medical supplies became scarce. Severe hunger began. These were the conditions endured by families abandoned by militants in Raqqa, Shaddadi, al-Mayadin, Mosul, and al-Baghouz. Eventually became under the control of Kurdish forces and were transferred to the overcrowded Al-Hol camp. Alongside women and children from dozens of countries, living conditions there were extremely fraught. For a long time, I searched for excuses for my decisions, and I blamed circumstances, other people, and fate. But Kazakhstan brought me and my 4 children home. I clearly remember the day when I learned about the evacuation in May 2019. Representatives of Kazakhstan visited Al-Hol and other camps. Despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, many women from other countries approached us in tears as they witnessed Kazakhstan bringing its citizens home. They said goodbye, knowing that they themselves had no opportunity to return to their own countries. I'm sorry. After our return, we spent a month at a children's rehabilitation center on the coast of the Caspian Sea. Doctors, psychologists, educators, religious scholars, and experts from government agencies and non-government organizations worked closely with us. All returnees underwent comprehensive medical evaluations to assess their health conditions. Emergency medical assistance and surgical operations were provided to women and children suffering from gunshot and shrapnel injuries. Particular attention was paid to children. Although many of them had been in Syria and Iraq, had been born in Syria and Iraq, official documents were provided to them in a way that minimized the risk of future stigmatization. To identify and document 33 orphaned children, modern genomic technology was used. After the adaptation period, I returned to my place of residence where my reintegration process continued on an individual basis. Specialists helped to assess the developmental needs of the children and determine appropriate educational pathways. Substantial psychological and educational support was also provided to the guardians of orphaned children. After assessments of living conditions, financial circumstances, and access to education, intensive long-term social support programs were developed for us. Over time, all of the returned children successfully adapted and caught up with their peers in school. I'm regularly in touch with other parents, and I've learned that these children are thriving throughout the country. They're winning academic competitions, chess tournaments, martial arts events, and many other sporting and creative competitions. I'm deeply grateful to the psychologists and social workers who, without judgment, helped me find the strength to change and understand the causes of my mistakes. Through their support, I developed a new understanding of my goals and my place in society. Today, I manage a small door manufacturing workshop and continue raising my children in Kazakhstan, where they have every opportunity to build a better future. Today, I appeal to the international community and to governments throughout the world to continue, whenever possible, their humanitarian efforts aimed at repatriating their citizens, especially women and children trapped in conflict zones. Behind every number and statistic stands a human life of a child who dreams of attending school, life of a mother who wants to protect her children, the life of a family hoping to find their home once again. Let us remember these people and never leave them without hope. There is a wise proverb in Kazakhstan: hope is a thread that never breaks. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Rahmet. I would like to thank Ms. Junusova for sharing her very emotional experience as a returnee, walking the path of rehabilitation and reintegration into her community in Kazakhstan. Well, now I would like to take a moment to pay tribute to all the victims and survivors of terrorism around the world, including the many first responders who, in the line of duty to help others, have experienced harm, loss, and sometimes made the ultimate sacrifice. So, minute of silence, please. Thank you. Please be seated. I would like to take a moment to bid farewell to the Secretary General, who will now be departing this session. And Secretary General, we are deeply grateful for your presence and for the tone you have set for this conference. Your remarks will resonate throughout our discussions over these 2 days. Thank you very much. I will escort you. We will now move to the ministerial segment of the opening session of the conference. And it is my great pleasure to invite His Excellency, Mr. Pedro Arnulfo Sanchez Suarez, Minister of National Defense of Colombia, to take the floor. Señor, per favor.
Please go ahead. Very good morning to you all and to the entire world. Colombia welcomes the convening of this 4th high-level conference, an essential opportunity to build on the international commitment to face one of the most serious threats to global security, which knows no borders: terrorism in all of its forms and manifestations. For Colombia, terrorism is a threat that has deeply wounded our history, our lives, our institutions, and the well-being and development of our communities. It is a complex, clandestine, and constantly changing phenomenon, or the result of deliberate acts by organized criminal actors seeking to sow terror, intimidation, and to destabilize democratic order. Today, we are facing a new phase in this threat. The criminal organized armed groups have no political or religious interest. They have an interest in drugs trafficking and illegal mining. It is a clandestine threat, an unhierarchical threat that is decentralized, which can adapt and is interconnected of civilian drones to carry out harm, and the use of social media for psychological terrorism. In Colombia, terrorist and criminal organized groups such as the cartel of the FARC, the ELN cartel, and the Gulf Clan cartel use civilian drones with explosives and for terrorist purposes to attack our civilian population and our state security forces. Even though we have neutralized 95% of attacks with drones, they now in Colombia, every 3 hours, there is an attempted terrorist attack with the use of drones. Furthermore, these terrorist groups use the media where they sow misinformation to heighten the tone of panic amongst the population. It is calculated that disinformation is perhaps the greatest threat to the world. This phenomenon poses urgent challenges for the international community. Drones and social media, originally designed for legitimate, productive, and peaceful uses, are now being instrumentalized by illegal actors to maximize the damage that they do, to reduce operational risk, and to amp up the psychological impact of their actions. Despite these challenges, Colombia recently saw presidential elections, the most competitive elections in our history, and yet the most peaceful in the last 40 years. We have adopted a comprehensive strategy to counter terrorism. This is based on prevention, response, and resilience. All of this with full respect for human rights and international humanitarian law. In particular, we have made headway in implementing our security and defense sector counterterrorism strategy. This seeks to boost the state's ability to anticipate, detect, and neutralize emerging threats, including those resulting from the use of new technologies. This strategy prioritizes the following: strengthening early warning systems and strategic analysis, incorporating new technologies in the protection of critical infrastructure through the National Anti-Drone Squadron, improving interinstitutional and interagency coordination, and at the heart of it all, increasing international cooperation as a fundamental pillar to addressing the transnational nature of this threat. Terrorist groups in Colombia are transnational threats. Therefore, they demand responses from the international community. No state can alone address a phenomenon that operates through international networks, which is funded through illicit economies and which rapidly adapts to the opportunities provided by globalization. Colombia therefore appeals to the international community to progress on 3 priority fronts. Firstly, strengthening cooperation in information and intelligence exchange, particularly to address the new terrorist actors and new attack modalities through the use of drones and other emerging technologies. Secondly, promote regulatory frameworks and international mechanisms to prevent the undue use of technologies by terrorist actors. And thirdly, promote multi-sectoral approaches to involve not only states, but also the private sector, academia, and civil society, in line with the multi-stakeholder approach that we are addressing today. Finally, terrorism continues to evolve, and in light of this, our answers to it must evolve more quickly. Technological innovation mustn't become an advantage for those who seek to sow terror. On the contrary, it must be a tool to boost security, prevention, and to further protect our societies and the entire world. Colombia reiterates its commitment to global counterterrorism, also to defending life and human dignity, and to building a future that is truly free of this threat. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Minister.
Now, I would like to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Adilet Rozbekov, Secretary of the Security Council of the Kyrgyz Republic. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, allow me to express my sincere appreciation to the United Nations and the United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism for organizing this important global event, which continues to serve as one of the principal international platforms for developing collective responses to evolving terrorist threats. I would also like to take this opportunity to express the sincere gratitude of the Kyrgyz Republic to the member states of the United Nations for their support in electing our country as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for the 2027-2028 term. We regard this confidence as both a great honor and profound responsibility, and reaffirm our commitment to making practical contribution to the maintenance of international peace and security. As you are aware, the Kyrgyz Republic welcomed the conclusion of the peace agreement between the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran. We hope that the positive momentum generated by this development will contribute to lasting peace and stability in the region. Considering the recent escalation, we call upon all parties to exercise maximum restraint and return to dialogue and diplomacy. Excellencies, the Kyrgyz Republic firmly believes that no state can effectively combat terrorism in isolation. Today, terrorist networks are rapidly adapting to new realities by exploiting emerging technologies, digital platforms, and transnational channels of communication and coordination. Under these circumstances, only effective multilateral cooperation, firmly grounded in international law, can deliver sustainable and meaningful results. The component authorities of the Kyrgyz Republic maintain productive cooperation with numerous United Nations entities, especially UNICEF. We attach particular importance to strengthening collective mechanisms for responding to terrorist threats. Our cooperation continues to expand with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Interpol, as well as within the frameworks of the Commonwealth of Independent States, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Collective Security Treaty Organization. At the national level, the Kyrgyz Republic continues to implement concrete measures aimed at the early detection and disruption of terrorist and extremist activities. Most recently, dozens of members and facilitators of an international terrorist organization were apprehended while preparing terrorist attacks. At the same time, our country's counterterrorism policy is guided by the principle of security through societal resilience. Kyrgyzstan continues to pursue a comprehensive approach that combines legislative measures with efforts to prevent radicalization, particularly among young people. We are convinced that resilient societies are built not only through law enforcement measures, but also through education, public awareness, the promotion and interfaith harmony, and the creation of opportunities that enable individuals to realize their full potential. We also regard the rehabilitation and reintegration of citizens repatriated from conflict zones as an essential component of preventing terrorism and fulfilling our international obligations. The Kyrgyz Republic continues to strengthen its national framework for countering the financing of terrorism. Pursuant to the instruction of the President of the Kyrgyz Republic, His Excellency Mr. Sadur Japarov, active work is underway to develop the national strategy of the Kyrgyz Republic on combating the financing of criminal activity and the laundering of criminal proceeds for the period 2026-2030. More than 20 government institutions, together with a distinguished pool of national and international experts, are actively engaged in this process. Ladies and gentlemen, the Kyrgyz Republic highly values the contribution of the United Nations to strengthening the global counterterrorism architecture and remains firmly committed to the goals and principles of the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy. We are convinced that a future free from terrorism can only be achieved through the collective efforts of states, international organizations, and civil society, based on mutual trust, respect for sovereignty, and our shared responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. The Kyrgyz Republic stands ready to continue making an active contribution to these efforts as a reliable partner of the international community and as an incoming member of the United Nations Security Council. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Rahmat, Ваше Превосходительство. Now I would like to give the floor to the Honorable Mr. Saddam Hussein, Minister of Land and Legal Affairs, Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. The floor is yours.
Your Excellencies, it is an honor to address this conference on behalf of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on this important theme, a future free from terrorism. Over the next few days, we gather as a global community to share our experiences and offer solutions to maintain peace, stability, and good governance in the nations of the world. But what does a future free of terrorism mean? From where all of us stand, because of our different experiences, we all have a different view on its meaning. However, We as a world now have to grapple with a minority of persons whose only motive is to create fear, chaos, and destruction. Terrorism has evolved into such a fluid concept that, that countries all over the world had to engage their various legislatures to capture the widest definition. It has morphed from revolutions to physical bombings, mass killings, and now weaponizing technology as a form of terrorism. It continues to evolve across borders, exploiting technological innovation, transnational criminal networks, online platforms, and increasingly sophisticated financing mechanisms. These developments underscore a fundamental reality. Terrorism cannot be effectively addressed by any single state, institution, or sector acting alone. As a small developing state in the Caribbean, we too had our experience with terrorism. In the year 1990, a group of extremist individuals attempted a coup d'etat by the use of violence to overthrow the then sitting government. It remains a sad day in our history, but certainly it was a learning experience. Geographically, Trinidad and Tobago is a dot in the world. Putting it in perspective, the land size of Trinidad can fit 2,000 times in America. But this teaches us one thing: we are not too big or we are not too small for a threat. We must always be vigilant and ready. Our population size is approximately 1.4 million persons, and we boast a world of our cosmopolitan nature. Our national anthem underscores the point quite effectively, where it says, "Here every creed and race finds an equal place." We live in a country where we celebrate everyone: Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and the list goes on. Hindus and Christians will join Muslims in the celebration of Eid, and the same for Diwali and Christmas. We're extremely tolerant and sensitive to each other's belief. I say that to emphasize the point that when dealing with issues of terrorism, we must be extremely sensitive and mindful of the cultural and religious sensitivities of the issue. We can all admit that when addressing this controversial issue of terrorism, there have been groups and individuals who may have felt attacked and marginalized. This conference will hopefully teach and sensitize many of us in this august chamber on how to deal with these issues in our individual states. Equally, we remain committed to implementing measures to criminalize terrorist acts and terrorist financing, implemented targeted financial sanctions, facilitate international cooperation, strengthen border security, and prevent the misuse of financial and non-financial systems by terrorist actors. We remain committed to implementing the standards of the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, and we are also mindful of the repatriation efforts of individuals in conflict zones. As you know, on the 3rd of June 2026, Trinidad and Tobago was elected to a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council for the year period 2027-2028. We are grateful for the overwhelming mandate we received from UN members and pledge to ensure that our tenure on the Council is utilized to advance the initiatives contained in the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy. A future free from terrorism requires us to remain vigilant, have unconditional resolve, and demonstrate strong political leadership in responding to emerging threats. In Trinidad and Tobago, this leadership can be found in the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, Senior Counsel, Prime Minister, who ensures our country relentlessly commits to combating terrorism in all of its forms. Trinidad and Tobago condemns terrorism. As we work collectively towards a safer and more secure world, let us reaffirm our shared responsibility to confront terrorism through cooperation, solidarity, and decisive action. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your statement. And now we will play a video message for you from the head of Anti-Terrorism Center of the Commonwealth of Independent States, Mr. Evgeny Sysoev.
Distinguished Secretary General, distinguished President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I'd like to express my gratitude for being invited to speak on behalf of the Commonwealth of Independent States, which this year marks its 35th anniversary, to share our experience. The CIS commends the leading role of the UN and agrees with the goals and principles of its charter. We are carrying out the global counterterrorism strategy based upon a 3-year cooperation program approved by the heads of state of the CIS in the areas of counterterrorism and de-radicalization. The heart of our organization is the Counter-Terrorism Center of the CIS, which coordinates the activities of the special services of the CIS states. Through our combined efforts, we, first and foremost, continuously develop our counterterrorism legislation of the CIS, which aims at bringing national legal systems into greater alignment. Secondly, we assess risks to security and share national experiences at yearly conferences, meetings, and consultations with the participation of special services and relevant international organizations. Thirdly, we carry out intensive exchanges of operational information, including via the Counterterrorism Center database, and we carry out raids which lead to the arrest of hundreds of terrorists and extremists every year. Thirdly, every year we hold counterterrorism drills and increase the effectiveness of our combat and other operations to curb terrorist threats on industrial, transport, and energy infrastructure, as well as in high-traffic public areas. Fifthly, we are constantly upgrading the training of members of counterterrorism units of special services, integrating the capacities of specialized agencies, academies, and scientific organizations of CIS countries. These measures have allowed us to achieve tangible results. For example, last year in CIS countries, more than 2,500 terrorist and extremist crimes were prevented. Almost 4,000 members and supporters of terrorist organizations were arrested. About 900 sources of terrorist financing were eliminated, and almost 19,000 websites with radical content were blocked. We held more than 100,000 preventive measures to de-radicalize people who had fallen under the influence of extremist organizations. Excellencies, we are strengthening legal, operative, and preventive measures through political and diplomatic efforts. On a regional level, to promote security in Eurasia, we are focusing in particular on integrating efforts with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the CSTO. One example of this is our joint counterterrorism exercises and conferences held in 2023 to 2025 in Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan, as well as the upcoming Counterterrorism Forum of the CIS and SCO in October of this year in Belarus, to which we've invited the heads of special agencies from 28 countries and leading international organizations. The priority of the Counterterrorism Center on a global level is strengthening cooperation with counterterrorism units of the United Nations. We have consistently helped to prepare reports of the Security Council on ISIS and Al-Qaeda, as well as evaluation visits of CTED to CIS countries. The latest example of successful cooperation has been the holding on the sidelines of the CIS conference in Dushanbe of a UN briefing on establishing an early warning and counterterrorism network in Central Asia, as well as the launch of a UN project to counter extremism. We're continuing dialogue on these important projects in the coming days at special events. Distinguished President, in closing, we would like to express our gratitude to our UN colleagues for consistently bolstering our cooperation. We are certain that the outcome of our very important global high-level conference, will allow us to make a real step toward strengthening peace based upon stability and mutual respect. We're prepared to share the experience of the CIS with partner bodies, and we are open to professional dialogue with all interested relevant regional organizations in order to strengthen international security. Thank you for your attention.
I would like to thank Mr. Sasoy for his recorded statement, and now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Ms. Anna Strażacka, Special Envoy for Counterterrorism of the European External Action Service, representing the European Union. Madam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Under-Secretary General Zuev, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to underline that the European Union is deeply committed to multilateralism. The United Nations remain the only universal framework with the legitimacy to represent global interests. The global challenges we face cannot be addressed sustainably by individual states. The closer we work together, the stronger we are in our response to these challenges. And the threat of terrorism and violent extremism conducive to terrorism is definitely one of them. The European Union, with its member states, is one of key actors in preventing and countering terrorism and violent extremism conducive to terrorism globally. We work closely with many countries, regions, and in multilateral frameworks to prevent terrorist and extremist violence before it takes root, to protect people, support social cohesion, reintegration and rehabilitation, to respond firmly when attacks occur, and to build collective capacity globally. We also bring together counterterrorism actors within the Global Counterterrorism Forum that the EU co-chairs with Egypt, and where many of UN member states take an active role. As the terrorist threat remains fast evolving, transnational, and deeply interconnected with geopolitical instability and rapid technological advances, we believe that close international cooperation and effective multilateral institutions are key to address it. Our support to the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism and other entities that form the broad UN City Compact show the value we place in multilateralism. This is underpinned by our joint EU-UN Global Threats Facility, which allows us to work closely with many UN member states. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to turn to the Global Counterterrorism Strategy. The strategy is the cornerstone of global cooperation in counterterrorism. It reflects 2 decades of intergovernmental consensus and provides a carefully calibrated and balanced foundation for our collective response. In this context, allow me to thank Their Excellencies Ambassador Kalku from Finland and Ambassador Hilale from Morocco for their role as co-facilitators. We commend the important work they have done to guide us all through this 9th review. The European Union is confident that our joint efforts will again deliver as they have in the past. Let me highlight elements that are essential to an effective counterterrorism approach and which have guided the European Union through this review. First, we must preserve the comprehensive and balanced nature of the strategy across all 4 pillars. It's human rights-based, rule of law-driven, gender-responsive, and prevention-oriented approach. This balance is the source of the strategy's credibility and its long-term effectiveness. Second, compliance. International law must be respected and applied consistently. Independent oversight and robust accountability are essential. The processes through which we work must be inclusive and transparent. Third, we must invest in prevention. We know what works: inclusive political processes, meaningful participation of women, respect for human rights, and coalitions that cut across regions and institutions, including civil society. Fourth, it is essential that our counterterrorism efforts translate policy into operational tools. Fifth, our response must build on a whole-of-society approach. We will not address the root causes unless we engage all parts of society. We do so from an early stage, starting with education, involving all layers of communities, faith leaders and local leaders, through the active and public participation of women and youth. Moreover, the voices of victims are central to our approach. The European Union remains deeply convinced of the value of strong multilateral counterterrorism cooperation, grounded in our common fundamental values. I look forward to this week's discussion and to our continued engagement to prevent and counter the terrorist threat. I thank you.
I would like to thank Special Envoy for her statement. And now we will play a video message by the president of the International Criminal Police Organization, as known as Interpol, Monsieur Luca Philippe.
Monsieur le Secrétaire Général,
Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished delegates in your various ranks and titles, distinguished colleagues, I would have preferred to be there in person with you, but due to prior commitments, I am joining remotely, but I hope to meet several of you next week in person for UN COPs. As president of Interpol, I'd like to share some thoughts about the evolution of the threats that we're collectively facing. You're surely familiar with the expression of the day, the famous nexus between terrorism and organized crime. Indeed, terrorist networks use the same routes as traffickers. They use the same facilitators, the same financial circuits, the same digital platforms, and sometimes the same forms of communication as criminal organizations. And this reality means that we have to rethink our responses. Today, information is more abundant than ever, but also it is more complex and difficult to use. And this means that it's not only a question of access now, but also a capacity to analyze, to contextualize, and to translate words into action. And Interpol, this means connecting the world's 25 million police and help them in their daily work in terms of understanding and studying criminal phenomena, as well as in operations. There are 135 million travel documents stolen or lost in our databases, at 125 individuals linked to terrorist movements in our bases as well. And our goal is simple: to make this information accessible and usable. By following the flows of individuals and terrorist groups, we can understand broader terrorist criminal flows that underlie them. Modern threats are increasingly interlinked and hybrid, another term you're familiar with, I'm sure. These phenomena prosper during times of conflict, institutional fragility, or failed governance. And this is then not just an issue of security, but also stability. In light of this reality, no organization can address this single-handedly. The Global Coalition Against ISIS showed this in 2015. As you know, the strength of this coalition was in channeling existing capacities around a common goal. Today, we must once again regain this spirit of targeted coalitions. In this regard, the partnership between the UN and Interpol is more important than ever. The UN has a unique capacity for prevention, stabilization, and political mobilization. Interpol provides operational tools, police data, criminal analysis, and the network of its 196 entities throughout the world. But what binds us together is not just the complementary of our mandates, but also our common resolve to strengthen and support member states and all actors brought together today, from governments to civil society, from academia to the private sector, to combat a threat that requires this exact type of collective mobilization. Thank you, and I wish you an excellent conference.
I would like to thank on your behalf the President of Interpol, Mr. Luca Philippe, for his video message. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Hussein Salama, President of General Intelligence of the Syrian Arab Republic, who, as I understand, has some important news to share with all participants. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the name of God, the most merciful and gracious, ladies and gentlemen, I come to you today from Damascus to tell you about the future of the new Syria and its story, which is entirely different from the story of its past. The state has regained its sovereignty and its independent decision-making following its liberation. It has rebuilt its national institutions and restored its regional and international relations. Today, Syrian men and women are returning to their homeland as a safe haven, instead of fleeing across the seas in fear and in search of refuge from the oppression of its security services. Excellencies, the criminal practices of the former regime and the international community's inaction and failure to act constituted a dangerous turning point that transformed Syria during that period into a fertile environment for extremism and terrorism. Today, however, we affirm the fundamental course of Syria's transition from the stage of managing crises to the stage of building sustainable stability. We have set before us clear objectives, foremost among which was safeguarding Syrian national security, contributing to the security of neighboring countries, and engaging effectively in international efforts to combat terrorism. We have also focused on preventing the return of extremist organizations, drying up their sources of financing, and strengthening our security and judicial and intelligence cooperation with international partners. This path is not limited to the security dimension alone. Rather, it adopts a comprehensive humanitarian approach that places justice at the forefront of its priorities and addresses social and economic challenges in tandem. From this perspective, and based on what we have achieved on the ground since our arrival in Damascus, we see encouragement in the fact that international partners now regard Syria as a key partner in regional international stability. Nevertheless, we remain in need of organized and targeted support directed towards institutions rather than short-term relief projects that leave no lasting impact. Ladies and gentlemen, today Syria faces challenges and threats that extend beyond the terrorism of ISIL, reaching cells affiliated with the remnants of the Assad regime and others linked to Hezbollah militias. Syria is also facing the ongoing Israeli threat to its stability. It cannot be overlooked, as this threat includes incursions, shelling, and the arrest of civilians, and what occurred yesterday is the clearest evidence of that. There is great need to provide support for the Syrian people through assistance that enables them to rebuild their economy, undertake real reconstruction, and transform words into deeds. In conclusion, our message from Damascus is clear. The Syria of the future is committed to leading efforts to combat terrorism on its territory in accordance with its national priorities and in conformity with international law. Syria of the future is open to international cooperation based on capacity building, information sharing, support for communities in camps, and addressing financing, recruiting, and safe havens for terrorists in order to ensure that terrorism does not re-emerge. Finally, before our Syrian people and before the world, we renew our pledge that we will make Syria a beacon once again, restoring its glory and its historic role in the stability of the world. Join us in writing this new history together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Shukran. And now we have to transition to the final segment of the opening session with an update on the 9th review of the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy, about which you've heard many times. I would like to first give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Elina Kalku, Permanent Representative of Finland to the United Nations in New York and co-facilitator of the 9th review of the Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Under-Secretary General, Ministers, Excellencies, acts of terrorism represent a serious threat to lives and safety of people and a profound global security challenge. The Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy, adopted 20 years ago, remains the only global framework to respond to terrorism threats. The 9th review to be adopted this week in the General Assembly remains relevant and provides tangible tools to prevent and counter terrorism. I encourage all member states to support the strategy. If implemented effectively, it will take us much closer towards the goal of this Counter-Terrorism Week, a future free from terrorism. Multilateralism can and must work here. In the 9th review, member states would yet again affirm that the UN and its entities play a central role in counterterrorism. Capacity building and efficient use of resources is necessary. It is widely recognized that terrorism cannot be prevented or opposed solely by military means. Prevention and building sustainable stability require a whole-of-society approach, institutions and societies that people can trust, as well as positive prospects for development. Counterterrorism measures must comply with international law, including international human rights law and international humanitarian law. The negotiations on the 9th review of the Global Counterterrorism Strategy were concluded last week. Since the outset, the priority of the co-facilitators was to ensure an inclusive and transparent review process. We heard views of member states and UN entities, but also many different stakeholders and civil society actors, including women and youth. In the beginning, our goal was to see whether the 2023 version of the strategy could be streamlined and updated, in particular when it comes to new developments such as growing use of ICT and new technologies for terrorist purposes, but also their use in countering terrorism. In the course of the consultations, member states raised a number of issues, including threat landscape and different phenomena conducive to terrorism, the way counterterrorism should be conducted, the victims' course, resources and capacity building issues, the role of UN entities, efficiency and accountability questions, and many other relevant aspects. After several rounds of informal consultations in different compositions during several months, it became obvious that an updated strategy was unfortunately not within reach this year. Therefore, the co-facilitators submitted a technical rollover text to the President of the General Assembly. It is important to note that the existing counterterrorism strategy remains very relevant in guiding our common efforts to fight terrorism. The fundamental goals and principles of counterterrorism still seem to unite us, and the 4 well-established pillars of the strategy remain extremely relevant. At the 20th anniversary of this important strategy, I sincerely hope that the General Assembly can adopt the resolution by consensus as it has always done before. To conclude, I want to thank the President of the General Assembly for the trust she has placed on us co-facilitators, and I also want to express warmest gratitude to my colleague and fellow co-facilitator, Ambassador Hilale and Madame Hanna Buciki of Morocco, as well as to my Finnish colleagues, Jaakko Jakkila, and Counter-Terrorism Ambassador Päivi Kairamo for excellent cooperation and wise advice. Warm gratitude goes to all delegations for their engagement during the past 4 months, and to the UNOCT team for their absolutely professional support. I wish you a fruitful conference and deliberations. I am convinced that the theme of this conference summarizes our shared common goal, a future free from terrorism. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Ambassador Kalku. And now I invite His Excellency Mr. Omar Hilali, a permanent representative of the Kingdom of Morocco to the United Nations in New York and co-facilitator of the ninth review of the Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy, to take the floor. S'il vous plaît, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur.
Beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. Secretary General.
Counter-terrorism, Excellencies, dear colleagues, it's both an honor and profound responsibility to address this plenary today alongside my distinguished colleague and co-facilitator, Ambassador Elina Kelko of Finland, as we present an update on the 9th review of the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy. It is a process that has tested our collective resolve, our diplomatic creativity, and ultimately our shared commitments to multilateral cooperation in the face of one of the gravest threats facing humanity, terrorism. At the outset, allow me to express Morocco's deep gratitude to the President of the General Assembly, Her Excellency Annalena Baerbock, for entrusting us with this immense responsibility and for her personal engagement throughout the process. Our sincere thanks and appreciation go to the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism under your leadership as acting USG Alexander Zouer, to the Department of General Assembly and Conference Management, and every member of the Secretariat team. This dedication made this process possible. Excellencies, from the outset, we as co-facilitator designed an inclusive, transparent, and structured negotiation process. We convened our four formal rounds of negotiations, multiple informal and formals, engaging the full membership in substantive discussions across all 4 pillars of the strategy. We listened carefully. We produced successive iteration of the draft text, each revision aimed at narrowing differences and building convergences. The ambition at the start of this process was significant. Member states brought forward many substantive and well-reasoned proposals reflecting the rapidly evolving nature of the terrorism threat, mainly the use of artificial intelligence by terrorist actors, the exploitation of virtual assets for financing and recruitment, the growing linkage between terrorism and transnational organized crime, the scourge of hate speech, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism, the persistent challenges of foreign terrorist fighters, protection of victims of terrorism, the role of civil society, human rights safeguard, etc. We engaged with all these proposals seriously, in good faith. However, as the weeks of negotiation progressed, it became clear that the membership was navigating deeply divergent priorities and, in some cases, fundamental disagreement. More than 60 paragraphs remained open as we entered the final stage of the review. On 19 June, several delegations formally broke silence on the Rev 3 text, articulating concerns that ranged from the inclusion of language they considered unacceptable as red lines to the non-inclusion of proposals they deemed essential. In a final attempt to bridge the gaps, Ambassador Carico and I convened a last round of consultation on June 22nd, bringing all delegations together to seek common ground. Despite the best effort of all parties, and despite the genuine spirit of engagement that characterized that session, no breakthrough was achieved. The gaps were too wide and the time had run out of, unfortunately. In light of these realities and in fulfillment of our mandate to submit a final text on time to the President of the General Assembly, we transmitted on 23rd the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism as a technical resolution adopted by this Assembly in June 2023, with the deletion of 2 paragraphs concerning COVID-19, which have become factually and operationally obsolete. After months of intensive negotiations in a world where terrorist threats have evolved dramatically, we had hoped to deliver meaningful updated strategy, one that speaks more directly to emerging technologies, to new threats, vectors, and to lessons learned since 2023. This ambition was not achieved in this cycle. Nevertheless, the final text of the strategy is a reiteration of our collective commitment to counterterrorism, and it is an indication that member states are united on the fundamental imperative to combat terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. E80L82, that the General Assembly will consider this Wednesday, reaffirms in unequivocal terms the 4 pillars of the strategy that have guided our collective actions for 2 decades. It reflects a hard-won consensus built over 20 years. It highlights that effective counterterrorism requires a comprehensive, integrated, and human rights compliant approach. We therefore firmly believe that this text, while modest in its innovation, remains a fair, balanced, and broadly supported foundation for the continued implementation of the strategy. Excellencies, I would like to say that I'm proud to have served alongside Ambassador Calico as co-facilitator of the 9th JIT review. I am grateful to every delegation that was engaged with us in good faith and spirits of compromise. That engagement, even when it did not produce the outcome we hoped for, is itself a testament to the seriousness with which this membership approaches its counterterrorism obligations. I would like also to join Ambassador Calico to thank our expert, Madam Hannah and Sir Alku, who worked with us closely and who have suffered a lot during the weekends, during the nights, to try to find compromise with the experts of other delegations. The Kingdom of Morocco remains deeply committed to this cause in this August Assembly, in our region, and on the ground, where the fight against terrorism is fought every day by the men and women of our security, intelligence, and law enforcement institutions. As we look ahead to the 10th review, we call upon all member states to use the intervening period to engage more deeply with UNOCT, with all relevant actors, and especially with one another, so that we may arrive at the next review better prepared to produce text that is genuinely updated and responsive to the evolving threat landscape. The United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy is one of our most important multilateral achievements. Let us protect and strengthen it for the sake of the victims of terrorism everywhere and for the sake of future generations. I thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. I would like once again to extend my sincere appreciation to both permanent representative and ambassadors of Finland and Morocco for their stewardship of the review process, which, as you just heard, was very interesting, but not really very easy. Indeed, we all look forward to the deliberation of the General Assembly on this Wednesday and this Thursday to conclude this And I would like once again to express my sincere gratitude not only to the Secretary General, but to all speakers for having shared their insight and perspectives, underscoring the importance of our collective efforts in preventing and countering. We have 36 side events sponsored by different member states and regional organizations and our United Nations partners. Next 4 thematic sessions of the plenary meeting of this conference will take place in conference room 4. This is one level down. I mean, you should take elevator and you should go to the level B1. Note that we are looking forward to reconvening here in this General Assembly hall, but only tomorrow afternoon for the closing session at 5 p.m. sharp. 1700, because I'm not sure that everybody got accustomed to the PM system. I mean, so 1700 sharp here. And this, the opening session of the 4th high-level conference of heads of counter-terrorism agencies of member states is adjourned.
you.